from this increased well-being and deeper self-understanding, there is a move towards more self-confidence and a more authentic way of life. So if you're feeling like perhaps you are capable of more, consider this idea, because I think you'll find that on some level, hey, we may be, in a sense, holding ourselves back. Hello and welcome. This is Self-Control, How to Build a Better Life. This is the podcast that seeks to inspire you to take control of your mind and your mindset, to go forward and build the life that you want to live, right? We're talking about finding the solutions to our issues within and taking control of the things that we can control to work towards a better life. And on that note, I'd like to share with you a realization I've had that I suppose is many years in the making. I do think that this realization that I had, quite simply, has improved my well-being overall. It has been a journey towards an improved well-being. And this well-being has come through a deeper self-understanding. And I do think that more than anything, self-understanding really is the bedrock towards a better life, towards further self-development. We're not just rushing to change, but in fact, we may be, if anything, rushing to get a better understanding of why we do the things that we do. Okay, so for this to make sense, I'll have to tell you just a brief story, and that was that I used marijuana pretty frequently for about 10 years. And when I was young and just starting it, myself and my good friend who I did it with regularly, we actually really liked the way in which, in our minds anyway, marijuana created this disconnect from the mind and the body. But that's actually a very dangerous thing, I would say, to have happen to a person, especially a young person. Pursuing something that disconnects the mind from the body really then made it so that I was disconnected in mind and body more frequently, not just when I was high. So I think the best way to put it is that marijuana, of course, gives us a very, physically anyway, it gives us quite often a feeling of euphoria, right? Of pleasure within the body. Any pain, inflammation, soreness sort of melts away. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you have chronic conditions that involve pain. Marijuana is very useful in killing that pain for a time. Coupled with that sort of pain killing and physical euphoria comes that sort of mental hamster wheel, at least for me, that starts to run, where I can now have all kinds of crazy thoughts and put connections together, and little tiny things that happen in daily life become more meaningful. I become more focused on them. In a sense, life takes on a deeper, richer quality when you're under the influence of it, for better or for worse. So, okay, we've now numbed our body and we're just sort of floating, and now our mind is racing, making connections and seeing things that may or may not be there. But unfortunately, as I say, this mind-body disconnect began to become a way of life for me all the time. And there was three key things that I began to observe in myself, and can see them now in hindsight, that really were a marker of that. So let me ask you now, when you hear these three things, does this apply to you? And it may not be marijuana that you're using, okay, but think about these 3 points. Poor emotional control. Maybe we're having emotional outbursts. Maybe we're unaware as to why we feel sad, why we feel angry, why we feel any amount of negative emotion like guilt or bitterness. Number 2, poor self-confidence. This is a hallmark of mind-body disconnect to me, because I did not know who I was, and so I could not be confident in what I was putting out into the world. As well, in those times of being under the influence, my mind would like to ruminate and run around about things that I had done wrong, things that had been taken from me, ways in which I'd failed. And sure, there was some constructive thinking, but it was not uncommon for me to just be baked out of my mind, floating on a cloud, but also going through a mental hell of the problems in my life. And thirdly, there's an unfocused quality to my life when I'm both on and off marijuana, unsure of really what I want to do besides probably get high, and not really seeing the larger picture, not really seeing the steps to take to get to where I want to go. You know, like we say, perhaps when we're high, we have these big ideas, and how often then do we really truly act on them or put them to work in the real world? Poor emotional control, low self-confidence, and an uncertainty or an unfocusedness to my life. So when things got to the breaking point and I quit marijuana about 3.5, 4 years ago, unknowingly I began to repatch or recreate that connection between mind and body. A big thing is realizing, okay, if there's a soreness or a pain in my body, the answer is not just to smoke marijuana. Now, like I say, if you have that chronic condition that is causing you pain, that there really can't be anything done about it, that's a different story. But if I'm doing things such as, working out too vigorously, maybe spending too much time on the move, or on the other hand, spending way too much time not moving, right? Getting stiff and sore, lazy. The answer is not to smoke marijuana for me, but it's to explore, what am I doing to my body that is leading to this sort of mental malaise, this sort of poor mental health? And the mind and body are deeply connected. And this is a very simple way to find it. Physical soreness and pain leads to poor mental health, or vice versa, or in that sort of vicious circle sort of way, that poor mental health can begin to drive us into further physical discomfort. All right, so now it may be time for you to think about this for yourself. Again, it may not be marijuana, but are we avoiding our physical intuition? Are there things that our body is saying to us that we're choosing to medicate or choosing to avoid? Are we choosing to maybe run away from some of the deeper issues around our self-confidence, which comes from self-knowing? And are we really maybe unsure of where we ought to be going because we'd prefer just to sort of regulate ourselves with this habit of ours? Without really realizing it at first, I began to fill my time that would have been spent using marijuana with activities that do reconnect the mind and body. Hiking out in nature, walking, weightlifting, yoga, and stretching. Those are all huge. Putting the body to work in manageable ways begins to sort of relieve that physical tension and free the mind in a real way, I would say. On the other hand, doing things that are perhaps more mentally stimulating, journaling, podcasting, playing the guitar, playing drums, singing, however badly, we're now seeing a connection between mind and body, right? The writing, the playing, the thinking, rather than avoiding the pain or going too deep into our thoughts, I'm now seeking to do things that help me unite mind and body. And I think through this, I'm now better able to anticipate, when are we going to have those emotional reactions? It's like, all right, I just had a tough night at work. There's a good chance I'm going to wake up tomorrow feeling lousy. The answer is not to medicate with drugs or porn or whatever. The answer is to go to the body, right? The mind is hurting, go to the body. Exercise, move. The body's hurting, okay, well, give it a break. Spend some time writing, spend some time podcasting, spend some time on some easy work in the office perhaps. And you may not have these options. You may lead a hard life. You may have to work hard all the time. This to me is an even greater invitation than to be kind to the self and to ask, am I driving my body too hard one way and avoiding the pain? Am I avoiding using my mind? And could I spend a bit more time in each realm equally? I found a much greater quality of life and a much improved self-confidence by not medicating the body and overthinking or avoiding thoughts and self-medicating, but instead by listening to what the body tells me, not being afraid to take a break, not being afraid to get out and get moving, not being afraid to put my thoughts down on paper. So I'll leave it to you now. Is there in some way a disconnect for you between mind and body? And can we seek to maybe alleviate some of our poor mental health by doing more with the body, doing more with the mind, and listening to what's coming from within? I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please let me know if this is helpful to you. Like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. And say it with me now: better is possible.